right into the middle of another, where
Sean Windsor and Mark Fellhauer
met with fear and fury in the dead of night.
From the pen of
M.L. Elric,
outstanding author of crime fiction comes his most famous character as
the Red Shovel Network,
presents The Adventures of
M.L. Soul of Detroit.
And now, with Gerald Moore, starred as
M.L. Elric,
we bring you tonight's exciting story, The Friend from Detroit.
You asked it around your country around my face. It's gone.
What are you doing? Come on.
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might qualify, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now, Al?
Hey kids, it's your old pal ML Elric, and I say old because we've been doing this for a long time. This is our 200th episode. We started this show 4 years ago, end of March in 2019. We had a brief hiatus because a certain broadcasting genius thought that maybe he knew how to do podcasting better and wanted to do it a different way. We, of course, know nothing about what we're doing, but somehow we're still doing it. And the genius is nowhere to be found. But that's okay, because we're surrounded by geniuses. There's our friend and co-host Mark Fellhauer, who's producing and helping keep this thing on the tracks. And then there's a certain wayward soul who sometimes comes in here to stay dry and out of the cold.
By the way, is that intro your way of Angel Reese sort of pointing at a ring, saying, I mean, is that what's going on here? I told you so. I was right. Look at us. Well, here we are, 200 episodes in, and to heck with you losers.
If this is the champion,
that's kind of what you're saying, right?
If this is a championship, this would be the definition of a Pyrrhic victory. But no, I let's put it this
Why
way.
don't you just say empty?
At least, well, that's why we have you to translate, because, you know, people in Ann Arbor, they don't like to put on airs. They like to just talk in plain language.
Well, some of them do.
Some of them do. But no, that would imply that this genius was of semi second place silver medal quality, and I think the facts are that no, he's not of silver medal quality. But we can get into a little bit of my history at Fox, because we're going to be talking about a topic that I think you may have heard about on Drew and Mike yesterday, how the power company didn't appreciate this show too much and may have been the beginning of the end in certain realms. But we have a lot to talk about with the Power Out, because we are always surging with energy here at the Soul Detroit. Right, Sean?
Yes.
Thanks, Sean.
Are you okay, by the way? I saw you almost die right there.
I hope it wasn't that. Wait, they weren't happy with us? Are you saying that?
What's that?
Is that based on fact, or is that just based on your sense of yourself?
DTE about I don't know.
Is this
4
news
years
to
ago,
you?
was not happy with an episode we did where we talked
No,
about.
I remember that. I'm saying,
you know what's
again?
changed since then? The grid is not more reliable. That hasn't changed.
No, I just didn't know if you got feedback, because we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I didn't know if you got more feedback.
From my employers at Fox, no.
That they were even unhappier. No, DTE.
Is this part of our hiring people with special needs program here?
Oh, that's
What's
fine. No. Keep relating to stuff a few years ago. That's good. But
It relates to today
Yeah.
with our special guest, we should probably just get into.
Yeah. So just for the benefit of people who have been here all along, we did talk about how unreliable DTE was. DTE was not happy. They made some inquiries at Fox, and I think that was the beginning of the end of this show's approval by the Fox News Network. So the status of this show's relationship with Fox 2 changed. The reliability of the grid has not, which is why we're joined by Keith Matheny of the Detroit Free Press, who wrote brilliantly and at length right after the latest power shortage. I think he probably had to run his laptop off a generator about how DTE and consumers are among the least reliable power companies in the country, and that when your power goes out, it tends to be out longer in Michigan than in any other state in the country. So Keith is going to talk to us about that. He also did another fantastic story last month about the chemicals rolling through Michigan on the tracks. And that's a topic that everybody in the country's been worried about because of the derailment in Ohio. So hopefully we'll remember to ask Keith a little bit about that. And if you have any noxious gases left over, if I could have just like a small vial to share with Sean after the show, that would be much appreciated. Maybe something.
I knew you could see that coming a mile away.
Just a little taste, just to wet his beak.
You knew that was
So sulfuric acid, what have they got? It doesn't have to be anything special. And we're joined also by Max Prokop, who is a lawyer extraordinaire, which it's impressive to think about a man as talented with the Juris Doctor stuff being his second quality, because he's more talented as a musician and a songwriter and a musician. And he has once again provided us with a new piece of music to celebrate this milestone. We will be hearing it later. He said it's called I Gotta Save You. Sean may say, I got to go to the bathroom when it's playing, because he does like to have his own exit music.
no, not during that, not during his
But
music.
it's pretty,
During your music.
pretty good
we
stuff.
finally found something on the show Sean enjoys. That's good.
That's right. He likes music.
Finally.
He does like music.
Yeah, just
Why
Max.
do you think I don't like this show?
He likes.
Oh, maybe because everything you say about it on the air.
Yeah, he loves the Talking Heads and Wilco.
Wilco?
Not so fond of Wilco.
It's fine. Yeah.
Apologies to the boys from Wilco. But we'll also talk a little bit about my latest column. Nepotism is alive and well in Detroit City Hall. We've heard from some of our listeners about that. And Trump is being arraigned probably as you're listening to this show or shortly before you tuned into this show. You will not see his mugshot, and that's part of a policy that the feds have that the free press has challenged here in Detroit. We've challenged it unsuccessfully. It's a ludicrous policy, and we'll talk a little bit about that later today in the show. But first, we want to thank the people who make this show possible. That's Luke Nowacki of Pinnacle Wealth Strategies, David Hall of Hall Financial, and the good people at the Caju Cafe will be telling you more about how they can save you money and show you a good time as we dive into the show. But now it's time to introduce our big star of the day, Mr. Keith Matheny. You are the guest for our 200th episode. Does the weight of that in any way affect you? I mean, are you having performance anxiety because we didn't just invite any old buster on here for our 200th show?
So on the one hand, I'm kind of feeling that, but on the other hand, I'm thinking it took you 200 episodes before you finally had to resort to putting me on. Well,
I'm hoping to get you in trouble with your bosses now.
I
when
see.
you're talking about DTE. So
That's great.
so welcome, and please prepare your resume.
So I've been the Great Lakes and Environment reporter at the Free Press for 10 years now. I hit 10 years this year, so covering a variety of different things, and occasionally our beloved state utilities, DTE and Consumers Energy, which basically provide power to, a good 90% of the state.
And I guess when I said prepare your resume, I meant when they come after you, you may need to go work elsewhere.
Oh,
Although
I see.
I think the
Well-
Free Press will probably stand a little stronger against the power company.
It's nice to know I'm not the only one that misunderstands here, though.
No, I got the joke. I'm just glad Keith went the way he went.
Yeah. No, he's taken it to a higher plane.
You always wonder if you write something unflattering about the power company. They obviously know where you live, and they have switches, but that has not happened. I want to emphasize that has not happened. I have not had any unexplainable blackouts since I wrote anything.
No, in fact, I would think your power is the last one they're going to cut, right? Because you're going to be like,
Well,
time
right
for a
about it.
follow-up.
I suppose.
What kind of feedback have you gotten on this story? It's very extensive. It's very well researched. I mean, have you heard from heads of DTE that's trying to challenge it, or from the Citizens Board, or?
I was a little bit surprised that the utilities did not really challenge it, because one of the interesting dynamics was right after we published, they had hearings. I think they had a state house hearing and then a state Senate hearing. And they basically said, yeah, we're working on it, then talked about the different factors that are going on and the things that they're doing. But in no way did they say, this just isn't true. We're not, bottom 5 in the country.
But that's their MO. Their MO is to, we know, and we're working on it. And then everyone forgets until the power goes out again. But it's been happening so often, over and over and over, that people are just fed up now.
Well, here's what Keith wrote. Michigan's two largest electricity providers, DTE and Consumers Energy, are among the worst performing utilities in the country at how long it takes them to get the lights back on after a power outage, a review of reliability data shows. Despite that, Michiganders pay more for electricity than their neighbors around the Great Lakes. Damn. I mean, those two paragraphs alone that's the last thing I want anybody to say about me, that I'm worse than anybody else, and I charge you more for sucking.
So DTE and Consumers are not remarkable for the number of power outages they have. They're sort of middle of the pack when it comes to that. It's how long it takes them to restore power, and it's been a chronic problem a decade or more, really. So it makes you wonder, if you're having the same problem year after year, why doesn't it change? It's one of those deals where they can go, if they're talking to someone like me, or if they're talking to someone like the regulators, they can list off their litany of, well, we're doing this, we're doing that, we've cut X thousand miles of trees. But you just kind of take a step back and say, well, then why isn't the power better? Why isn't the reliability quicker? And they'll say, well, it is where we've done it. Well, why don't you do it in more places? Why isn't someone making you do it in more places?
Well, it's been 3 years since we talked about this on this show, and it doesn't seem to have gotten any better. And the reply from the power company, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they basically just say the weather in Michigan blows.
And they're actually not wrong about that. So there's a lot of scientific evidence that our storms are getting more extreme in the winter, in the spring, sometimes in the summer. I think I counted since July 2019, there have been 4 power outages in the state where more than 450,000 people were without power for multiple days since July 2019. And of course, if you go from those big numbers to say 100,000 people, there have been way more of those. 50,000, way more of those. So there is something going on with our weather. But one of the interesting things about looking at the data across the country, well, Ohio kind of has our weather. Wisconsin kind of has our weather, Indiana, Minnesota.
Similar, yeah.
So you can sort of get close to apples and apples as you're doing those comparisons, and they're just at the bottom when it comes to restoring power after an outage. Or near the bottom.
Why? I mean, what do you think it is? Do you have an opinion as to why they're so bad at getting the power going again? Is it a way our grid is set up? Is it just how the organizational structures of the companies are set up?
There seems to be a few different things, and if you talk to the utilities, they'll tell you certain things. If you talk to people who kind of observe or critique the utilities, they'll tell you some of the same things or different things. One of the things they talk about is we have a very old transmission system. We were one of the first places anywhere to have electricity, for our cities. So when you look at a newer city, they're going to have more automation kind of built into their grid. And what automation does is if you have a power outage in a certain area, you can isolate it and kind of divert power around it. Okay. We still have the domino effects. Okay. But yet again, you ask, okay, how long have we known about that?
Yeah,
you've been getting quite a bit of money for many, many years.
So why won't they fix it? Is it just it just costs them too much?
They say that they are fixing it, and they will point to, well, the regulators have to give us, they have to decide that they approve of what we're doing, and we have this amount of money earmarked towards putting more automation on our power poles. They're doing a little bit more on putting lines underground, particularly the line from your power pole to your house. Which is useful, because when you look at what is really causing all of these outages, well, it's tree fall and branches. When the wind blows, when there's ice, the branches break, they hit the lines, they knock them out.
So I live in Berkeley, and there's a lot of old trees there, and we used to lose power all the time. They came through, trim the trees like they say they do, put new lines in, and thankfully, have had very few outages. But my thought is, well, these trees are still growing. So at what point are you going to come back? And what is this rotation you're on? Because trees grow when you don't cut them. I mean, they could spend more on cutting the trees if that's their simple solution for it.
Right. If your problem is tree fall, DTE talks about this surge they did after the bad summer of 2021 storms, where we had a couple of these giant multi-day outages. They said, we're going to do a surge on our tree trimming. And they did. They spent, I think, $90 million more than the.
But it's after the problem. Do it
right?
before the problem.
And the point is, well, if you're only getting this percentage of improvement from the areas you've cut, why don't you spend many more, millions of dollars to do it in more places?
Do you know off the top of your head what they spend on tree trimming?
It's a lot. It's somewhere in the vicinity of about $170 million. And then they did this surge to add about 70 million more. But they've got a vast area. So, and it's sort of like painting the Mackinac Bridge, right? When you're done, you have to turn around and do it again.
I guess my feeling is because I feel like people get really annoyed about two things of how these utilities spend their money. Number one, on advertising, which I don't get why they spend money on.
Because they're a monopoly. They don't have to spend advertising. Right. They got all of us.
No, whenever there's an outage, you start hearing new ads too pop up, like saying, we're doing our best, which you don't really need to spend that money, in my opinion. And the other thing is the amount of money they spend donating to these politicians, where they clearly say, hey, we're not being forced to do this, so why would they? And I kind of appreciate that argument, but they know what they're doing. Do you know how much money is spent in, lobbying and advertising?
I didn't look at that because I was pretty tightly focused on reliability, but they certainly, they do spend that money. One of the things we found is I think the data went to 2021, and there are a few different ways of looking at how long you take to restore power when there are outages. One has to do with a formula that factors in all of the people that are served by the utility, and then another one is the duration versus how many people were out, and they're really bad in both of those categories. In 2021, the only power company that did worse than DTE on this duration problem was Entergy in Louisiana, which was hit by a Category 4 hurricane. So they're the only ones we beat here in Michigan. And I don't recall us having any weather events that approached.
No, we always have a 100-year storm.
When the power went out, whenever it was, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, the guys at the end of my street, I think I told Mike and Mark this, it was a crew from Florida, because obviously when there's a massive outage, they got to go out and find crews from around the country. And these guys, I went down to talk to them a little bit, and they started telling me, this is by far the weakest, oldest technology, and they hate working on it, but they come because the money's good, right? Mm-hmm. And they said from their perspective, the issue is what they called sequencing in terms of the duration. So it takes forever, kind of to your point with automation, right? It takes forever. The path they have to follow to get power back on is unlike almost any other place in the country. Now these guys are just working the lines, but still, they have some experience, right? They travel around the country doing this. And I wonder how expensive it is to,
well, that's another cost.
Fix that, right?
Well, it's a whole ounce of prevention, right?
Right. They said there's some that the way they get on the computers and try to do that is unlike anything they've ever seen. These guys go around the country.
Yeah, one of the things I've heard repeatedly was that we have an automation problem for sure, where one of the things that was likened to me is the old Christmas lights, where if one bulb went out, the whole string went out. And now on the newer ones, if one bulb goes out, it's just that one bulb and the string stays on. It's sort of the same concept here, where if they had the right technology, they could isolate a blackout before the trucks even roll, before the crews even go out. And we don't have that to any great degree on our very large, vast power systems.
They also talked about the infrastructure, that the poles, they were from Florida, where it's a little bit different. They have to worry about hurricanes and so forth. But just the way the poles are stuck in the ground and how they're not very sturdy, I guess, was their point, right? Mm-hmm. The way in Florida, in other places, they use a lot more cement, for example, to keep things sturdy, because it's not just the lines that go down. Sometimes it's a pole that will go over and take the lines. Not just the lines from the trees, but the poles themselves sometimes. They were talking about this. I don't know how much of that is a problem.
Well, and again, my point on all of this stuff is if you take a step back, well, why haven't we fixed it?
Right.
We've had the same problems for well over 10 years. So, and it makes you wonder, some people out there believe that the regulatory setup here in Michigan with the Michigan Public Service Commission just doesn't have enough teeth to hold these guys to account.
Oh, and they know it too. I mean, they know it, and because for whatever reason, a utility is publicly traded on the stock market, so I guess they see the responsibility to return dividends to be far greater than that of their customers, because what choice do we have? Because you were saying before the show, some states, you can choose your power company.
Yeah, in a lot of Texas, in parts of Pennsylvania, I think in parts of New Jersey, they're deregulated to the point where it's not one utility controlling the grid. So if you don't like the service you're getting from one, you actually have other options.
Do those operate better from what you found in your research?
I really haven't done enough to kind of intelligently talk about that, but that might be another avenue for me to go down, is to sort of, because one of the things we were promised with our regulated system long ago was it would be reliable and it would be affordable. Well, as ML touched on,
neither nor.
We pay, especially on the residential side, I think the next closest utility was in Illinois, and it was 10% less. Wow. So that's how much separation there is from them to number two.
What about public utilities? Because I've read that sometimes they're the most efficient.
Like co-ops.
Yeah, basically where the community owns it.
So MPSC, the regulators, one of the things they've told me, they're kind of getting sick of doing the same things over and over again and not seeing any appreciable difference. They've ordered a third-party audit to come in and check out DTE and consumers and see, what are you doing? What aren't you doing? What are other people doing? And one of the things they said they want them to look at is Lansing's power company.
Oh, the Board of Water and Light.
Board of Water and Light. So I think it was back in 2013. There was a terrible ice storm that locked down Lansing, among other places. And according to their manager now, he said they performed terribly in it. They people were like 40% of the power customer base was without power for more than 11 days. So there were a lot of ramifications after that. The manager at the time got fired, and they said we have to do things differently. Well, one of the things they did was a giant surge of replacing the dilapidated, out-of-date equipment and poles and lines, a very aggressive tree trimming program, which I think they went from 3 crews to 33, and they've kept them in place ever since 2013. And when they're done in an area, they go right back around and cut again, which makes it easier, because at the time they were cutting 20 years of tree growth. You can imagine what that looks like. And you can imagine how people freak out. Hey, what are you doing to my tree? One of the things they said they did was they were kind of heartless about that. Like, you know what? We are not going to have tree branches above our lines. And sorry if you don't like it. Well, their reliability, they went from one of the worst to one of the best. And MPSC wants to look at that and see how does that translate. Obviously, DTE and consumers are quite a bit bigger, but what are you doing? Because in this last ice storm, which obviously hit all of the Great Lakes region, Lansing didn't have a line that went down in the street. And they were down to the east of them, and they were down to the west of them. They brought crews in from other states to be ready for that storm, and they sent them away because they didn't have anything for them to do.
Well, that's one of the things that I always puzzle over. It's got to be incredibly expensive to bring crews in from all over the country who are probably working overtime. They're getting paid per diems. There's lots of travel. You should by now be able to figure out what that cost is every year and maybe put it into prevention. And I don't know if you looked at this, Keith, but it's my understanding that the way the rates are set up, DTE, and I assume consumers as well, is guaranteed a certain profit margin when they put their rates in there. So they're a for-profit, shareholder-held company that has a monopoly and is guaranteed a certain profit. What other businesses do you know that are guaranteed a certain profit? It should be you take your chance, and if you run your utility like shit, then you either go bankrupt and somebody takes you over, or competitors come in and say, we're going to do it better and offer more value for your money.
That's one area that they're doing quite well in. One of the things we looked at was the past 10 years of return on equity, comparing consumers on DTE to the national average for utilities. They've been consistently above it and well above it. So they bring in more money for their investors than the average utility, despite, at least on reliability in getting the power restored, being among the worst in the country of utilities their size.
So that's one of those things where maybe you need to sacrifice some profits, maybe not all of them, but some of them, to make your service better. I mean, reinvest in, and I know, and I've seen DTE advertise for tree trimmers. I understand there's a labor issue there, so you may not be able to hire everybody that you would like to hire. We know that they've been doing, to my mind, a very good job trying to get off of coal and transfer the grid to more clean energy and more reliable, renewable resources. So I compliment them for that. But when you switch it to reliable and all this other stuff, but it doesn't get into my house, that doesn't feel, whether it's renewable or not, it ain't turning on the fridge.
Going back to Lansing, one of the things that they said that after they did all this work to be better ready for storms that come along, they don't have to put as much money into being prepared for storms. So they can then I think they said they cut their storm response budget by 70%. That's money that can go to other things. And
in their case, probably to lower rates, right? Because they're not a for-profit operation.
Right. Yeah, their rate, they've done some modest rate increases over the years, but all this stuff I'm talking about with them, they never had any super dramatic rate hike. So it can be done. You think about how vast DTE and Consumers Energy's power areas are, and then you think about a storm like that recent one we had, the ice storm. What did that cost, the response to put all those wires back up? And imagine if you had hardened the system to be more ready for that, the money saved to do other things with.
Yeah, it's one of those things like changing the oil in your car, or do you want to replace the engine? Well, I think changing the oil is not only cheaper in the long run, but it's easier to budget for, because you know you're going to spend this much every 3 months, as opposed to, well, in 3 years, I got to get a new motor. I mean, this does not seem that complicated to me. And one of the reasons why I think we caught DTE's attention when we talked about this a few years ago with a guy who installs solar systems is they were going for double-digit rate increases, but at the same time, they were slashing the amount of money that they were paying to people who generate their own power and feed it back into the system. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm one of those people. I have solar panels, and we generate power, and we sell it back to DTE during the day, and then we buy power from DTE at night to keep the lights on when the sun's not high. But it just seemed crazy to me that they would want to jack up the rates, but to people who are generating their own power, they want to lower what they're going to pay them. I mean, it's illogical.
And when you talk about, people keeping their power on, the more it's kind of individualized, the less problem you're going to have with, if your neighbor has an outage, right?
Well, in theory, but because we're tied into the grid, even if the sun is shining, I get no power from my panels because I get shut down when the grid gets shut down. And that's to protect the line workers. And we should be clear here. I think this is obvious, but let's put it on the table. We got nothing but love for the line men and women who go out there. They're going out in the shittiest weather, in the most terrible conditions.
16-hour shifts, if not more.
Incredibly dangerous jobs. I can't imagine working a bunch of doubles and then dealing with live energy and saying, well, I'm kind of tired. Maybe I'm not going to pay as close attention. Next thing you know, you're a piece of bacon. I mean, God bless these men and women who do that. I'm sorry some of them were distracted by Sean, who hopefully brought them some biscuits or something to warm their bones.
No, they were chilling in the street waiting for orders. But
okay. Yeah. So except for those slackers on Sean's block.
No, they weren't slacking. They weren't slacking at all. They were exhausted. They'd been working for however many days straight. Yeah. And
your presence invigorated them?
Well, these people are treated.
It does have that effect on people. They call you double espresso on the street. That's what they get.
It's one energy problem they can't fix.
Yeah, right. No, they can't.
Keith, so who has the teeth to make them change?
Well, one of the things, maybe the legislature, I know
They have no incentive to do that.
it makes you wonder, because I feel like we do this little two-step where we have a big outage. People are very angry. They get their, lawmakers angry. We have angry hearings. We get a lot of contrition from the utilities about how they're going to do better. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So are we in
With
a
a fundraiser thrown in there along the way for the lawmakers.
Are we in a rinse and repeat again? Time will tell. But I did feel like the vibe this time was like, are you kidding me? Again, in the middle of winter, I'm without power for 5 days.
They know, like you said earlier, that the atmosphere in this state is very advantageous for them. Is it because the Public Service Commission is weak, and who's on that commission, and how do they get on the commission?
Well, that's another issue that probably needs some exploring, because, the kinds of people who get involved in it are people who have experience in the industry. So there's a little bit of a revolving door kind of question to that. But
are they appointed by the governor? Or
yes,
they are.
They go through confirmation hearings in the Senate.
Right.
And I did a story at Fox 2 when I think this may be, if not the newest Public Service Commission member or the second newest, guy named Norm Sari, who Governor Snyder appointed to the Public Service Commission. His career was as a lobbyist at Consumers Energy. And when he went through his Senate hearing, his confirmation hearing, the senators treated him like an old friend because he was an old friend.
Yeah.
They asked him no hard questions, and one senator said, I know I should be concerned about your ties to the power company, but, I know you and you're such a good guy. I'm sure you're going to do a great job. And I'm not saying Norm has or hasn't done a great job. I haven't scrutinized his record since he got on the Public Service Commission. But how in God's green earth do you think that the best person to regulate an industry is someone who was paid to try and ease regulations on an industry? I mean, does he have a deathbed conversion where now he's the toughest guy on the industry because he knows how bad they are from the inside? Or is he somebody who just says, they're nice folks?
And another thing to think about is, to a large degree, these commissioners on the Public Service Commission are reliant on staff giving them reports. And I'm sure there are a lot of good people who do a good job at what they're doing. But in order to do that job, you have to have experience in the electric utility world. So yet again, a lot of them, there's sort of this revolving door into and out of the utilities that you're regulating. One of the chairman of the MPSC, Dan Scripps, was telling me one of their frustrations historically has been they set the spending priorities when they set the budget, but then the utilities themselves manage their budget, and they have some discretion to say, well, we were going to do some long-term spending in this area, but we decided we're going to do something else. So one of the things
we wanted to renew the lease on our suite at Comerica Park, and that messed us up.
Well, to be fair, as you mentioned, they're doing a lot of transition from coal to natural gas. That's been a huge expenditure. One of the things they talked about at the MPSC level is, like, for example, on this most recent tree trimming surge that DTE committed to in the fall of 2021, those funds were earmarked and must be used for trimming trees, or they don't get that money, basically. So they're saying that may be the way down the road to okay, you say you need automation on your power poles to better isolate blackouts. Well, do it. And here's the money, and don't do anything else with that money. And don't come back for more money until you've spent that money and demonstrated all you've done with it. And yet again, you say, well, wait, we weren't doing that already, over 10 years plus?
So last time there was a power outage, the Woodward corridor was hit pretty hard. And I noticed, these are a lot of small businesses that are losing out on any kind of revenue they were going to make that day because they don't have power. A lot of them don't have generators. Why is there not some small business association that can go up there and raise hell because they're losing money for not having reliable service?
Every rate case that these utilities do, there are groups that come in and kind of intervene in the case, and there are small business groups. There are large corporation, because they use a lot of power too, that will usually say, one of the things I notice is they'll ask for the moon the MPSC will reduce it,
Yeah,
and then they
get
pat
what they
themselves
want.
on the back. Look, we cut what they said they wanted by 30%. Well, they kind of knew where it was going.
That's incredible.
No, and it's insane how this works. The public service commissioners, some of them, when you look at their backgrounds, you're like, oh, these people are never going to approve a rate increase. These are hardcore lefty, screw the man type people, and they still end up approving significant increases. Here's who has a lot of juice in this process too: manufacturers and big businesses. And big businesses, large utility users, pay a lower rate than consumers because they've been so effective at putting the screws to DTE and the Michigan Public Service Commission, because they have a lot of clout, they have a lot of lobbyists themselves, and they go in there and they say, we can't profitably exercise or run our businesses when power rates are this high. So they get basically a more favorable rate because they have more juice. And the people who make these decisions or who weigh in on this are some lefty groups, some consumer groups, obviously not spreading the money around that big business is. There's the big business groups. There's the attorney general, who will often argue against rate increases. And then there's the utilities, who argue for rate increases. And then there's the Public Service Commission that makes the ultimate decision. And when we were talking about this 3 years ago, DTE went in and they wanted something like a 10% increase, and they got 5%. So the next time they came in and they asked for like another 10%, and they got another 5%. And I think when they asked for the 10%, they said, if we get the 10%, we don't need to ask for another rate increase. But instead they got 5 and 5, and they got to their 10. And Jason Towler is writing here on Facebook. By the way, Jason, I didn't see you at our championship game last night. I did injure my knee.
Volleyball game, that's right.
I did hurt my knee, and I was looking for some PT there, but I guess we'll talk about that off the air. He says, I was a fellow at MSU in the Michigan Political Leadership Program, where politicians learn the ropes and lots of staffers learn the ropes. And 2 days were sponsored by DTE and consumers, and those were the only days that were sponsored.
Well,
So
DTE also just sponsored the Michigan Spring game, so that was fun.
I hope the power goes out in Ann Arbor this season.
Well, it was a really bad day, too, and a lot of people did lose power around there, so I don't get it. Because we're fucked, man. There's nothing we can do about it.
But the care and feeding of lawmakers starts very, very early on, and it's very hard for them to get weaned from that money. But the problem is, as often happens, we get mad, the power's out, the power doesn't go out for a while, we move on to something else. There are people in Lansing whose job is to basically stay mad about this all the time. And stories like Keith helps remind people how the system works, that it's not working, and that we need to do something about it. So Keith, thanks for really diving into that. I mean, it's so you can still find it at the Free Press. We will put a link to his story on our website. That's mlsoulofdetroit.com. The other thing is, we'll put a link up there to subscribe to the Free Press. This is a subscriber only story. With this link, you'll get a $5 Amazon gift card if you subscribe to the Free Press, and I think it's something like you get a year's subscription for $9.99, so you can get a year's subscription at basically half price. So take advantage of that, because one of the ways we keep the watchdogs on the power company is to make sure that we don't run out of juice ourselves, and that juice is your paltry subscription. It's much. In fact, I pay $10 a month to be tied into the grid to supply power to the grid. $10 a month for the privilege of being tied to this unreliable system. You can get a subscription to the Free Press for $10 a year. So, I mean, come on, man. Keith, before
what an odd comparison.
Well, no, but think about this. I'm paying $10 to provide somebody something, for the
That's
privilege.
what heroes do.
It's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Thank you for your service.
I'm happy to be of service. But Keith also did a great story about hazardous waste going through Michigan. Tell us real quick what you found, Keith.
So a lot of people were alarmed about the derailment in Ohio, and they got more alarmed here in Michigan when they found out that a lot of that material that had spilled everywhere was being shipped here. I got to admit that story kind of caught me flat-footed over the weekend, that everybody freaked out about it, because I was like, well, of course it's coming here. We have one of the largest hazardous waste landfills in the country. And it's, now owned by Republic Services, which was doing the cleanup for Norfolk Southern there. But everybody got up in arms about it and actually got that our lawmakers got that shipment stopped, and now they're diverting it to, I think, Indiana. Well, that kind of stuff is coming through here every day to this landfill, to these treatment places, to our deep injection wells, and stuff that's even more toxic. It's a daily thing. You've seen the rail cars that run, right across our major freeways and all through Metro Detroit. When you want to find out specifically what is coming by you, they basically don't let you know. A, because of proprietary trade secrets, and B, because of national security. And I guess it makes sense if you knew this toxic chemical is coming by at this time at this location. Probably not a good thing. But the other side of that coin is, well, I want to know what is running right by my elementary school. And it's a pretty complicated two-step to find out about it.
So should we be scared as hell?
Not necessarily.
I'm a little scared.
The rail industry will tell you that 99.9% of the time these things arrive without incident, and it's probably true. And they'll also say, running this stuff by rail is better than it being on the road on trucks. And that's probably true. Well, I can tell you that a lot of the stuff that is making its way to these hazardous waste landfills in Wayne County is on our roads coming by truck. And people have told me it's not about the fact that 99.9% of the time everything's fine. It's that 0.1% of the time it can be catastrophic. And there have been some incidents. There was a train car that was parked for the night on a hill full of petroleum product, that the brakes gave way and it rolled into a town in Quebec a few years back and exploded, and something like 36 people died. It burnt down the downtown. So these things can happen. They don't happen very frequently, but when they do, they can be really bad.
It also seems like when they do, the response there doesn't seem to be much uniform response as to what they're supposed to do, and it seems like it's up to the rail companies. Is that true?
Well, one of the things that I found that was interesting as I looked into this is the remarkably small role that our state environmental regulators have in this. It's all the Federal Railroad Administration. Even the EPA doesn't seem to have a really large role in it, although maybe they do once something spills. So it's a somewhat kind of insular regulatory system that is basically designed to keep the trains moving and keep the products moving that industry wants.
I get that, but maybe I'm cynical in thinking that, there's probably like the utility companies, there's a lot of changeover between people that worked for the railways, that work for this commission, that oversee it.
Absolutely. And I talked to folks for that story at the Detroit Fire Department, and they'll very enthusiastically say, oh, we're ready. If anything like this ever happened, we know what to do. We know how to go and see, what is spilled. Is there a risk to people? Should they shelter in place? Should they evacuate? We're on top of it. But then I talk to critics of the industry who say, well, wait a minute. These rail industries making their millions and billions of dollars have sort of offloaded the emergency response if something goes bad to communities.
To the local level.
Now they'll talk about, well, we have these robust training programs for them, but you're still reliant on these communities to provide your sort of backup and to make if you do your job wrong.
So that's great if it happens in Detroit, where we have a professional fire department where people have a lot of experience and it's large enough that you can have specialty units. But what if it happens in Bad Axe? Where there's a bunch of old boys jumping in a pickup truck with their rubber boots on, and they're like, hey, what's with this cloud? I don't know. Oh, shit, my lungs evaporated.
What happens if it happens in East Palestine, Ohio?
Exactly.
Oh, wait, it did.
Yeah, that's bad, right? That was not good.
It gets complicated, right? And I don't know if you remember this, but there was some stuff spilled there, and they were worried it was going to explode, so they set it alight.
Yeah.
And you see these billowing black clouds, and they're telling you everything is okay. You don't have
toxic
to worry.
gas. Yeah. What a mess.
Well, Keith, usually when we hang out, it's a lot of fun. But
Being the most depressing person in a room with Sean Windsor.
Yeah, if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm not sure that you're seeing a lot of smiles here because we're now kind of really scared. But this may be our last episode, depending on what we run into on the rails on the way home. But Keith, thanks very much for your great work. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to having you on again when you bring us some more Tales of Fright. I mean, damn, dude. Thanks for bringing up the energy.
Why do I always have to be the heavy? That's what I want to know.
It's the
well, they're
messenger.
They're really complex stories, but I thought you did a good job breaking it down. You know, it's very readable, so I guess that's
one of the things that's kind of out there that we all have to sort of think about is we've decided as a society that we're going to use these chemicals in our industries to have our consumer goods.
There's no turning back now.
And you know, it has to be moved. And when you have this toxic waste, well, we know what happens. 100 years ago, they would just dump it in the backyard. So you kind of do need these hazardous waste facilities. I don't really know what the answer is about. I think you just got to be really diligent on the safety protocols of it and not necessarily leave it up to the industry.
To your point before that, I don't think we want the rail companies deciding that, hey, let's light this on fire because we don't want it to spill. You know, it'll be a lot easier and probably cheaper for us just to light this on fire because it seemed like they unilaterally just made that decision with no oversight. And look at the damage that's caused. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's good. But Keith does write a lot about other uplifting topics too. He writes about the environment, the Great Lakes, what's going on in our beautiful forests, and so he.
You'll have to have me on to talk about butterflies sometime.
Yeah, and he's a lot of fun at parties, and he does a great Geddy Lee if you ever get him on the karaoke. So
that's right.
So Keith he's a man for all seasons, even if this tends to be sort of a bleak one that's really scary and terrifying. But thanks, man. We appreciate it.
You bet.
So let's tell you about some folks who can help you. Keith can help you by keeping an eye on the people. He's the watchman who makes sure that these guys don't get away with, I don't want to say necessarily murder, but with all kinds of things that could lead to death and destruction. But Luke Nowacki and David Hall, they make sure that
what an uplifting segue.
Well, I mean, they look towards the future, but they see good things, and they can help you get to a better future.
Well, we're getting to that the time of the year where home buying just starts taking off, right? It's spring, it's summer, so buying season is here. It's easier than ever right now to get a new home with Hall Financial's exclusive Buy Smart program. And what is that? Well, they're going to give you up to $2,500 towards your down payment. You can get pre-approved the same day with the most credible pre-approval in the industry. That's Hall Financial's 5-star certified pre-approval. Hall Financial can even contact you with a top realtor. They have a huge network of realtors. So whether you're looking to purchase a new home, refinance your current home, you need to call Hall Financial first. 866-CALL-HALL or chat with them online at callhallfirst.com. And with all that money you're going to save, why not invest it? Why not put some money down for your future? And one of the guys we recommend and trust is Luke Nowacki. He's got a whole team at Pinnacle Wealth, and they can help you, figure out what your goals are going to be, how old you are, where you want that money to go, and how you want that money to grow as well as you get old. So call them, get a free consultation, 248-663-4748. That's 248-663-4748.
Because when you call Luke, he'll make it all about you, sweetheart.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Royal Alliance Associates, Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Royal Alliance Associates, Inc.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek? Or we're turning into cool guys?
Are we skipping the geek?
No, in fact, I want to talk about...
Where's the song? Because I need to use the restroom.
I want to talk about the woman...
Wait, you said you would stay.
LSU, who you referenced at the top of the show, pointing to her ring finger. Tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Oh, so she's a guard for LSU. LSU beat Iowa in the national title game. And Iowa has a player who, Caitlin Clark is the National Player of the Year, who likes to talk trash herself and use the John Cena, no see me, open hand over your face. The ring gesture is actually from Steph Curry, who did this last year in the NBA Finals. I want to say in the third quarter of Game 6 against the Celtics. The third quarter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is ballsy.
There's 25% more of the game left to go, as I'm led to understand.
And he's showing this is on the road, by the way, and he's showing the Celtics crowd.
That's cool. Celtic fans are kind of passive.
He's
People in Boston don't really get involved.
So Angel Reese, when LSU won, sort of followed Caitlin Clark around, putting her hand in front of her face, doing the gesture that Clark does, and then she pointed to her ring finger, and which I thought was really fun. But a lot of people
But she's taken a ton of shit for this. People who don't know the history of the woman from Iowa, or any of this other stuff, or Steph Curry, are just all over this woman from LSU.
No, it's ridiculous. I think a lot of people. It's funny because a couple of former colleagues were texting last night about this, and we were kind of debating about it. And Michael Rosenberg, who wrote a really good piece about the championship game for Sports Illustrated, said in his mind, a lot of people were shocked because they don't watch women's basketball, and they were surprised to see them acting just like the men. And if you have a problem with that, that's sexist, right? I mean, it's basketball first. And they should be able to act. I
think it's good for the sport.
It's great for the sport.
You have to have heels. You have to have people that hate.
So there's definitely some sexism going on, and some black folks think there's some racism going on too, because Caitlin Clark wasn't criticized for her trash talking the way Angel Reese was for hers, and there were some folks trying to make a distinction, saying Angel Reese did, that it was more over the top, et cetera, and other people were like, no, this is a strong black woman. If you have a problem with that, then you have some other issues going on.
So I did not pay attention to the game. I knew that the woman from Iowa was a tremendous athlete,
incredible
player of the year. I saw a picture, I think it was in the Free Press, of the guard from LSU pointing at her finger while she was next. And I just saw this isolated image. I thought, what a bitch. I mean, what a poor sport. What a bad loser. And then you hear the whole story and you're like, I kind of feel like the player from Iowa is the geek because she's kind of a shit talker the whole way, and this has been flipped around.
Well, you're going to call Larry Bird
the
a
victim.
geek?
Wait, you either like it.
Larry Bird is a geek.
You either like the shit
He's a geek
talker.
who can hit any
Isaiah
bucket he
Thomas
shot.
a geek? You're going to call Dennis Rodman? He'd like to trash talk. What about Michael Jordan?
Exactly, yeah.
Or LeBron's not a huge trash talker, or Curry.
You either like it or you don't. But, I mean, ML, to your point, I can understand why people would see that and not like it. But should you have to know the whole background story? I mean, I didn't know the whole background story.
Oh, I think you do, because if I didn't know the whole story, I'd say this woman from LSU is heads and tails geek.
But do you have a problem with trash talking in any other sport? How about in the NFL?
Well, when I play basketball, all I can do is trash
what
talk.
About
so I
the
don't
NFL
want to take
or
that out of
college
the
football
game.
when somebody gets a hit and then they stand over him and just kind of stare him down? Or
I don't
the
like
way you
that.
celebrate a touchdown, right?
I think it's great.
It's fabulous.
I don't like the standing over an injured player type of thing.
Well, no, not injured
not that,
player.
yeah, come on.
Nobody would
But
stand
that's the
over.
example you used.
No, when you hit a player and get him down, and then you just stay down. Like Lawrence Taylor, there's great
Chuck Bednarik.
There's great video of him, audio of him actually sacking the quarterback and then saying, "You better stay down there, son, because it's going to be a long afternoon."
Okay. Well, so now that we have the full context, I think it's obvious. Michael Rosenberg, you're our Geek of the Week. I don't know. It's obvious to me.
There's an all-night party in room 7609. And you can dance together all night if you've got the time.
Room 7609 is where you go in the podcasting world for great music. But if you want great music right here in Metro Detroit, we recommend the Caju Cafe, the pride of the East Side, where the kitchen is open Monday through Saturday till midnight because they got great food, and on Sundays till 10. This week, on Wednesday, it's karaoke. Thursday is Blue Thursdays. Friday, Wheels of Fire, a tribute to Cream. On Saturday, they have Velos, Three-Spoke Wheel, Rob Zink, and the Collaborators. Closed for Easter on Sunday because the good thing about the Caju is they recommend. They appreciate the Lord. You got to take some time for Jesus, right?
Amen.
Even Jesus is just all right. That was more than just a song. It was It's a whole, I guess, some whole religion based on that. And then on Monday, Evan Perry and friends for the Open Jam, Muscle Madness, all you can eat mussels. Tuesday, well, just make your own fun. And then we're back with karaoke on Wednesday. So to find out more about all the great stuff going on at the Cadieux Cafe, great music, great food, great fun. The feather bowling lanes are always open. Go to CadieuxCafe.com. We have been challenging our listeners to nominate songs, pop songs that they've heard, where when they listen to it, they say, wait a minute, that's got a great new wave hook in it. Mike Johnson, who's always on top of new wave developments, this week suggested this fantastic song by Lady Sovereign. I want you to listen to it. On the back end, I'm going to ask you this question. Which new wave song do you hear when you listen to So Human?
That's easy.
I know.